Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Eva. Welcome back to our Shangshung Arts Lectures. And tonight it's our pleasure to welcome Dr. Eva Leick, who's just passed her PhD exactly about the topic of tonight, the Khaita joyful dances. So congratulations on getting your PhD just a few days ago. And our talk will last about an hour tonight, and then we will have some time for questions. So if you have any questions, you can write them in the chat or just keep them for the end when Eva will kindly answer our questions. So I won't say much more. Eva will tell us all about the beginnings of Khaita and all, which was, I won't say much, but they were founded by Professor Chögyal Namkhai Norbu, who is also the founder of the Shangshung Institute. So we're very happy to hear about it tonight. And thank you, Eva, and thank you everybody for joining us.
Thank you. Okay, so I start sharing my screen. Can you see well? Yes?
Yes, we can, yes.
Okay, perfect. So thank you, Jamyang, for inviting me to this talk. I'm very happy to share with you some insights into the practice of Khaita joyful dances. So I, of course, have a personal interest in Khaita joyful dances. I'm a very engaged dancer in the Khaita practice. And also, as Jamyang said, I just completed my PhD, my doctorate on Khaita joyful dances with the full title of Investigating Tibetanness and Wellbeing Effects. And I did this at the Department of Dance Studies and Music Studies at the University of Salzburg. And I just had my defense this week, so everything is very fresh, and I'm very happy to share with you now some ideas about Khaita and more specifically about what I did in my research. So thank you very much, and I will just start right away. So Khaita joyful dances, or short Khaita, was initiated by Chögyal Namkhai Norbu. And as several of you might know, he was a renowned Dzogchen master, but also an eminent scholar of Tibetan history and culture, and he taught at the university in Italy for several years. And in particular, he had an interest in Tibetan folk songs. So in fact, very early on, from the age of 16, he started collecting Tibetan folk songs when he traveled with the nomads amongst Tibet. And this resulted in the publication Musical Traditions of Tibetan People, Songs in Dance Measure in 1967. So in this book, he published songs and he also commented them already. And this really represents his early engagements with Tibetan folk songs. Khaita developed very much later, so really at the end of his life, because he died in 2018. So Khaita developed in 2011 when he started collecting songs that he found on YouTube. So Tibetan songs by Tibetan artists. And he started collecting them, paying particular attention to the melodies and also to the meaning of the lyrics. And then he presented these songs to the students of the International Dzogchen Community. So the International Dzogchen Community is an association that established as a consequence of his teaching activities as a spiritual master all around the world. And he asked his students to sing and dance to these songs. And back then, the practice was still referred to as Tibetan modern songs and dances. And the name Khaita was only given to the practice in 2014 by Chögyal Namkhai Norbu. And while some dances were taken from the original music videos as presented by the Tibetan artists on YouTube, Namkhai Norbu also soon started asking his students to create new choreographies by taking the meanings of the Tibetan lyrics into consideration. I will expand on this later in more detail, but just to give you an idea for now. And so from this initial corpus of songs, a collection of several songs and dances was established that was and is practiced by a diverse group of the participants in the various centers of the International Dzogchen Community. And usually one of these dance sessions starts with singing and is followed by dancing. The Tibetan name Khaita thereby already hints at the quality of the dances, namely harmonious, melodious movement in space. So Khaita can be divided in two parts. Kai means sky or space, and ta, melody. So it can be translated to melody or harmony of the space. And Chögyal Namkhai Norbu welcomed everyone to sing and dance, regardless of age, regardless of social class, gender, dance experience, or even predilection for moving. It was and further is not necessary to be a follower of his spiritual teachings to practice Khaita, yet the practice developed really in the centers of the International Dzogchen Community. So he encouraged all his students to practice together, making Khaita a daily activity in several places of the world. And as many Khaita dancers recall now, the beginning of Khaita was quite chaotic. So dancers were not sure of the steps, the formation changes, and of course also the melodies and the rhythms were unfamiliar to many. So there was little explanation in the beginning, with practitioners managing and decoding the choreographies for themselves. And then with the time, so this was really a kind of direct experience, and then with the time, the practice became more structured and some expert dancers whom others could follow emerged. And in fact, many of these experts then became Khaita instructors at the possibility of the Khaita exam in 2016. And they were authorized by Chögyal Namkhai Norbu to teach Khaita. And so nowadays we have 60 instructors who are in charge of daily Khaita activities, performance preparations, giving courses, etc. And also there is the newly established educational program that allows or that encourages new experts and instructors after the completion of a 3-year program to become instructors. And I also know that now the group in Dejamling is listening, so thank you very much for your participation. So in Dejamling is starting the new cycle of this program at the moment. So what is Khaita precisely? Khaita consists of a collection of 358 songs, and it consists of approximately 240 dances. The songs are organized in 3 groups: Message from Tibet, Mekor, and Barsam. And the chronologically first collection is Message from Tibet, and it incorporates 108 songs. It was also published as a book. So I will jump here to the next slide. This is the cover of Message from Tibet. And what is interesting inside, if we look inside now, is that we can see the song texts as all the Khaita song texts prepared. So we see the Tibetan original, then we see the transliteration into Trajor. Trajor is a phonetic transcription system devised by Chögyal Namkhai Norbu for people who don't know how to read Tibetan letters to pronounce it correctly. And then it also has the English translation down to it. And in addition to this, we can also observe here that there's a kind of musical representation that helps people to sing. So for example, these little waves here, they signify changes in the melody. And also these flower ornaments, they represent musical parts without singing. So let me go back here to this. So this was Message from Tibet, 108 songs. And then we also have the Mekor collection. Mekor is divided into 3 subgroups that we call Metreng. And each of these groups is divided into 6 groups with 10 songs each. And so this sums up to a total of 180 songs. And then we also have Barsam. Barsam is subdivided in 7 groups with 10 songs each. And again, if we sum this all up, we have a total of 358 songs. And all songs from these three collections, including their Tibetan transcription, phonetic transliteration in Trajor, as well as the translation into English, can be found on the Khaita app. Okay. So the Khaita app, what is the Khaita app? This is a website that is very easily accessible, is khaita.com. And it can be downloaded to one's phone as an application. For this reason, I call it Khaita app. And in this application, each song is categorized according to a number and a letter. So for example, Gavala, now I don't see it because I have you here, but it has the number B103. So this means it's from the Barsam collection, first group, third song. And so in this Khaita app, we can also find commentaries by Chögyal Namkhai Norbu to some of the songs on the meaning. And this enriches really the understanding of the songs by providing information on its cultural, historical, and religious context. In addition, we can also see the original YouTube video by the Tibetan artists. So here you can see a picture of this woman here who is from the music video. And then if you would click here on dance, you can see the Khaita dance demonstration video. In addition, some songs also have tutorials. So for people who want to learn, they have it just there, and it's very easy to learn the steps and then dance along to it. And so what I want to mention also, that all these Khaita songs, so all 358 songs, were carefully chosen and categorized into the groups that we have by Chögyal Namkhai Norbu, taking account the melodies of the songs, the meanings of the lyrics, the regional origins of the songs and dances, and also the artists' dance backgrounds, not dance backgrounds, sorry, backgrounds where they come from. So for example, he particularly favored artists who openly promote Tibetan culture and express their feelings and thoughts about what it means to be Tibetan in contemporary times. And he supported singers who managed to communicate their feelings without calling for political activism. And he also paid attention to the places of residency of the artists. So he primarily focused on the Tibetan regions of China, but also other places. What are the Khaita songs about? The Khaita song themes revolve around universal values, such as the preservation of culture, language, nature, and the environment, the overcoming of limitations and conflicts between different groups, as well as the expression of love and respect for one's ancestors, for example, one's parents. And the Tibetan lifestyle is thereby centered. So Chögyal Namkhai Norbu explains it very well in the foreword to Message from Tibet, and I would like to read here. He says, having taken this strong interest in current Tibetan music, I listened to the songs again and again and clearly recognized that most of the male and female Tibetan singers concentrated on several distinct and important points. For example, a great love and loyalty to their country, commitment to the Tibetan people, the importance of preserving the major and minor fields of knowledge, above all, the spiritual teachings, that is the essential wealth of the Tibetan people, the preservation of the environment in which Tibetans live, the preservation of knowledge of ancient and contemporary history, the hope that before long the Tibetan people, each individual living inside and outside Tibet, first among them the sacred great holders of the Tibetan teachings, so for example the 14th Dalai Lama, may reunite on the firm commitment of unity among all the people of the three regions of Tibet. So this is the song themes. And there are two major reasons why we practice Khaita, as Chögyal Namkhai Norbu explained many times. So first of all, it represents a support for the Tibetan culture. And hereby, Chögyal Namkhai Norbu, he did not only direct this request to support Tibetan people to only Tibetans, but also to non-Tibetans, to preserve Tibetan cultural knowledges that are beneficial for all humanity. So, for example, again, in the foreword of Message from Tibet, he writes, regardless of whether one is Tibetan or not, if all those who have a love for Tibetan culture can take an interest in these new Tibetan songs, this attitude will certainly be of help to the Tibetan culture. Therefore, I earnestly request all such people to keep this in mind. These songs and dances, which are strongly related to the ancient and modern culture of Tibet, are very valuable since they have the important quality of contributing directly and indirectly to the preservation of the different aspects of Tibetan culture in our world. So first reason for Khaita, the support of Tibetan culture. And the second reason is Khaita as a Dzogchen practice. This is not surprising since Chögyal Namkhai Norbu was a Dzogchen master. And here he writes, I realized that these new Tibetan melodies also have the special value of communicating in words the aspiration, happiness, and suffering of the Tibetan people, and that this expression is perfectly connected to the authentic nature of Ati Tsokpa Chempo, endowed with a power beyond limits. So, as many of you might know, Ati Tsokpa Chempo refers to the essence of the Dzogchen teachings. So this means a primordial state of knowledge of one's nature. So according to the Dzogchen view, this state is present in all beings and can be discovered and experienced through the introduction to one's natural state through a knowledgeable Dzogchen master. And once discovered, this familiarity with this state can be developed and practiced until one is no longer conditioned by any form of dualism. And so Chögyal Namkhai Norbu found Khaita a perfect practice for doing this. And so what do we do in the Khaita practices? So I will explain in a while that Khaita performances, so stage performances, regularly take place and are important for Khaita's development, but is actually not the main focus. So the main focus really lies on the regular, often daily practice sessions that are open to all, regardless, as I said, of dance experience, age, gender, social class, religious affiliation, national or cultural background. So in this way, Khaita functions as a practice for everyone that aims at the promotion of self-observation, awareness, presence of movement, space and music, and it also fosters group collaboration. The collective, in its diversity, becomes central. So Khaita sessions usually last for 2 hours, and they include both a singing and a dance part. And the point of the singing practice is to become familiar with the melodies, the lyrics, and the meanings of the Tibetan songs, and then ideally to remember them when dancing. And it also further serves as an encounter with the Tibetan language that might not happen otherwise. And then in the dancing session, usually we dance simple circle dances or cuadros, as we call them. And also there are some more complex dances that are also easy to follow, but maybe a little bit more complex than the circle dances. Then there are also Khaita performances. So Khaita is performed quite regularly outside of the International Dzogchen Community and as well inside. So for example, events or celebrations within the International Dzogchen Community are Losa, the Tibetan New Year, or also the birthday of Chögyal Namkhai Norbu on 8th of December. And some other performances that took place outside of the Dzogchen community, for example, include shows at the British Museum in both 2018 and 19, also in Gran Canaria in 2017, at the New York City Dance Parade, at the CID World Congress in Athens, There's also an annual Tibetan Khaita festival in Brisbane, Australia. And very recently, we just performed in Santa Cruz, in the capital of Tenerife Island. And to give you an impression, I would like to share with you a short video from the performance of the British Museum in 2018. And if you're interested, all of this is in YouTube, so you can watch in a more relaxed way later, but I want to just give you a short idea of what this show looked like. Okay. Again, if you're interested, you can check this out later on YouTube. And so I will provide a little bit more information at the end where you can find all the material and all of this. For now, I would like to turn to my own work that I did on Khaita, namely my PhD dissertation. Okay. And so my dissertation was in the Department of Dance Studies, as I said already, and it was guided by two main research questions. So first of all, I asked myself how and for which purpose are notions of Tibetanness evoked, referred to, and created in the Khaita practice? And second question, which effects on both an individual and a group level may result from practicing Khaita regularly? I will go into more detail on this. I just want to mention first that my dissertation represents the first academic engagement with Khaita. So for this reason, it was also my aim to introduce Khaita in its diversity to the field of dance studies and open it up to connecting points for future research and also for other disciplines. So how did I go about answering these questions? I pursued both a sociocultural and a kinesthetic trajectory to investigating Khaita because I wanted to understand it both from the movement aspect as well as its cultural embeddedness. So for these aims, it was necessary for me to immerse myself as much as possible in the field. And what is the field? The field thereby means the places where Khaita is practiced, taught, and studied, mainly the places of the International Dzogchen Community. And I conducted multi-sited field work in different parts of Europe, being an active observer, as we call it. And this means that I not only learned several dances, but actively engaged in the lifestyle of the Khaita community, meaning that I lived, danced, and performed with them. And as I said, I'm also currently studying to become a Khaita instructor, and I'm participating in the 3-year Khaita educational program. And as part of my fieldwork, I collected qualitative and quantitative data through an online survey, and as well as expert interviews, where I spoke to 11 Khaita instructors and also 1 Tibetan musician whose songs are used for Khaita. I also used dance analysis, of course, to observe, describe, and interpret movements of the Khaita dances. And other than that, I relied on literature from various disciplines to have more theoretical background. So, okay, as I said, my first question revolved around the connection between Khaita and Tibetan culture. And I started this research on this topic by asking myself, who are the Khaita dancers And where is Khaita practiced? So I mentioned before that Khaita developed within the centers of the International Dzogchen Community. And here we have a map of the International Dzogchen Community. You can see that there are several centers around the world, in fact, in each continent, with the exception of Africa. And you can see these bigger circles with the symbols represent gas. So these are bigger centers, and then the small red dots are smaller centers. These are called lings. And you can also notice here a predominance of centers in Europe. So the interesting thing here is that Khaita more or less simultaneously developed in various places. So Chögyal Namkhai Norbu traveled extensively until his death. And in 2011, he started with the Khaita practice in various places at the same time. So this is interesting if we look at the map here. And as a consequence, the Khaita community is extremely diverse. So I have some statistics for this. This is not all the Khaita community, but this is just a small part. And here we can see that Khaita dancers come from all kinds of nationalities. I have here representatives of Ukraine, USA, Argentina, Australia, Italy, etc. And interestingly, I also looked at their places of residence. And here we can see that it's not always the same, which means that Khaita dancers show a high mobility. So for example, if we look here, Spain, we only have 2% of people who indicated to be Spanish citizen, but in fact, 23% indicated to be living in Spain. And this is due to the center in Tenerife Island, Canary Islands, of Zamlinga. Okay, so there are many things to say about this, but the main point that I want to highlight is that Khaita dancers are mostly non-Tibetan. So in fact, we only have 2% here indicating of being Tibetan or of Tibetan descent, and nobody living in the place of China or the Tibetan regions. So this is very interesting. And because of this phenomenon, so both the simultaneous development in different places at the same time, and this kind of like multinationalities, I define Khaita as both translocal, transcultural, and cosmopolitan. So this basically means that Khaita happens at several locations at the same time and is made up by a diverse group of dancers from various ethnicities and cultural backgrounds. And they come together to share the same values and ideas about the world. So in other words, to dance. And if we consider this, the question, of course, arises, and if yes, how Tibetan is Khaita? And I investigate this in detail in the first part of my dissertation. There are many things to say about this, but what I found is that there are several moments in the Khaita practice that construct a notion of Tibetanness. So meaning that they refer to elements of the Tibetan culture, including examples from the cultural, spiritual, linguistic, and astrological spheres. And maybe the most obvious example is the use of the Tibetan language. So, as I said before, all songs are performed in Tibetan language by Tibetan artists. And in addition to this, numerous songs directly address the danger of language loss. So you might know that the Tibetan language, or rather the Tibetan languages to be specific, because there are so many varieties, are endangered. And Chögyal Namkhai Norbu always stressed the importance of preserving the Tibetan language. Why? Not because he is Tibetan, but as a means to access Buddhist texts preserved only in Tibetan language. And these texts are relevant to all of humanity. And as such, he viewed Tibetan language as a gateway to Buddhist texts with universal value. And also, Khaita becomes a method to expose and introduce students of him or Khaita practitioners to this topic of the Tibetan language and making them aware of its decline. And so many songs revolve about the theme of preserving the Tibetan language and also to gain or regain a sense of Tibetan identity through the language. And one of these songs is Pake, which translates as the language of the fathers. You can see here it's T1.10, so it means it's from Message from Tibet, first group, 10th song. And the song starts with a child reciting the Tibetan alphabet. And then, so first I will read the translation and then we can listen together. Then the singer expresses her thoughts on the Tibetan language. And she says, however I look at it, I see the need to study Tibetan well. It is necessary to study Tibetan well. To develop Tibetan culture, we need to rely on Tibetan language. To study Tibetan well, we need good teachers. And then she continues saying, ka, ka, ga, na, all the letters of the Tibetan alphabet must be learned by heart. If you study well, you are a good Tibetan child. And now let's listen to this. Okay, again, if you're interested, you can find all of this on the Khaita app later. And I just want to draw your attention here to this image, to this picture. You can see Chögyal Namkhai Norbu's hands, where he is showing the text of a song text. This is not this one, it's another song. And you can see his handwriting of the Tibetan letters and also the George's system, because he did it with most of the songs, in fact. And then another point in the Khaita practice that clearly refers to the Tibetan culture is the use of the infinite knot as the symbol. So the infinite knot is not an invention of the Khaita community. On the contrary, it is a well-known symbol amongst different traditions of Buddhism and belongs to the 8 auspicious symbols of Buddhism. And in this sense, the knot represents Tibetanness, as Buddhism is really inseparably interwoven with Tibetan culture. So the 8 auspicious symbols, they carry slightly different meanings according to which Buddhist tradition one looks at. In the Tibetan tradition, they usually constitute the body of the Buddha. So the endless knot thereby symbolizes the mind of the Buddha and also his endless wisdom and compassion. Generally, the endless knot stands for interdependence and interrelationship of all phenomena with no beginning and no end. And so the Khaita logo displays the infinite knot, and it is used to represent continuity, endlessness, and interdependence. It symbolizes also harmony, spreading around the world and connecting all its people. It symbolizes, and this is as it says on the Khaita website, it symbolizes uninterrupted, infinite flow of energy without obstacles. The flow of love, like melody, pervades and manifests in all our hearts and throughout the earth through songs and dances. And the logo's golden color represents the sun that enlightens and shines in all places and connects people everywhere through melody. Another instance of referring to Tibetan culture is, of course, in the use of the names of the Khaita groups. So I said before, message from Tibet, Mekor and Barsam. Message from Tibet is kind of self-explanatory, is really about this message from the Tibetan artists about what it means to be Tibetan in contemporary times. Mekor is divided in metrengs, and Mekor and metreng are concepts, terms from Tibetan astrology. So a Mekor is a cycle of 180 years that is made up of three metrengs to each 60 years, so together 180 years. And this kind of forms a basic unit of time in Tibetan astrology that can be compared to a century in Western calendric counting. Yes, this. And Barsam, as the last collection, translates from Tibetan as bridge in between, and as such it is placed between the collections of Message from Tibet and Mekor. So I wrote my dissertation in the discipline of dance studies, and for this reason I was of course particularly interested in researching the movements of the Khaita dances. And the question that arose for me was, is Khaita Tibetan dance? And before going into more detail, I will already give the answer, because yes, it is, but not only. So when we trace the origins of the Khaita choreographies, we can observe that there are different starting points. So either it's the Tibetan music and the lyrics, the meaning of the lyrics, or it is a previous choreography as presented by the Tibetan artists in their music videos. So let me show you an example, then maybe it will become clearer. First, I will show you Rivochak. This is the name of the dance. And first, I will show you the Tibetan original from the Tibetan artists. And then I will show you the Khaita version. And we can observe that the choreography is basically identical. So let's watch. Okay, now let's watch the same, the Khaita version. Okay, so you could see the choreographies are, besides maybe some stylistic differences, but the movements are the same. However, there are also some Khaita choreographies that are not based on Tibetan originals at all, and that have been created by students of Chögyal Namkhai Norbu under the consideration of the song lyrics. And here what happens is a media transfer from text into movement. And because many different practitioners have created Khaita dances, Khaita choreographies are very diverse, and they, of course, are influenced by the person's individual style and also previous dance experience, etc. And while they often exploit similar combinations, for example, the basic step and also other typical Khaita combinations, as we might call, choreographers are given complete freedom as long as the song's meaning is respected. And so for this reason, the choreographies are very diverse. Some are very complex with complex formation changes and detailed mudras. So mudras are hand gestures. And now I appear to begin because I have the sun here directly in the back. Okay. I want to show you also an example here to give you an idea of how different choreographies can look like. And this song is called Mijur Damsik, and it includes many mudras that correspond to the meaning of the lyrics. I will not go into detail, but if you're interested, there is material available to study this. And it's called Immutable Words of Pledge. Let's watch. Okay. So what I want to make clear is that there are two different starting points for Khaita choreographies, but the process of making a Khaita dance did not finish there. So each dance also had to undergo a feedback phase by Chögyal Namkhai Norbu to be approved and to be opened to the public. So, and I represent this in the table. So how did this happen? If a choreographer wanted to create a dance, they could start from either the Tibetan dance as presented in the original YouTube video or from the music. And then they would present this in front of Chögyal Namkhai Norbu. And then Chögyal Namkhai Norbu, he would give feedback. He would ask for changes of movements, provide ideas for formation changes or something similar, give an idea for a mudra, or he would just approve the dance as presented. And this clearly shows that Chögyal Namkhai Norbu's feedback was considered more important than the accurate reconstruction of Tibetan folk dance. Because only after his approval, the dance was opened to the public for everyone to learn and also diffused on the internet. After this, it became an official dance to be included in the Khaita archive. And one of the principles of corrections that Chögyal Namkhai Norbu would give was, for example, the striving of balance in choreographies. So sometimes he would ask for choreographers to change the direction of turns to make it more balanced and also to make the dancers more present and aware. So of course, this was very important for him. So if somebody asked me if Khaita dances are Tibetan dances, I would say yes, of course, but not only precisely because of this difference in development. The base is the original Tibetan dance or the Tibetan lyric, but neither the feedback stage nor this kind of like later performance stage where the dances are practiced and open for stage performances have this idea or this desire to 100% reconstruct the Tibetan dance. So rather aspects of collaboration, the communication between the dancers, presence and awareness, the ability of the group to harmoniously dance together are foregrounded. And this already brings me to my last point that I would like to address here in this lecture, namely the effects that may result from practicing Khaita regularly. So I focused on this in my second part of the dissertation in more detail. Now I will give just a short overview. And I define effect as an observable outcome, sensation, or event linked to the Khaita practice. But I am aware that these are rather potentialities rather than measurable and quantifiable outcomes because I did not work in the laboratory. I focused on 4 different effects, namely the aspect of well-being, mindfulness, joy, and presence. And these 4 categories crystallized through my observation in the field, my own dance practice, and also because of the interviews of the experts that I conducted. And also, Chögyal Namkhai Norbu theorized many of these points when he gave explanations about Khaita. So the first point, well-being, can be defined as incorporating physical, cognitive, mental, and social advantages. And generally, scholarship agrees that all kinds of dance promote well-being. So it's beneficial for one's health, and it also builds good relationship with the people we dance with. And as such, it also carries an important social function. So I was not very surprised to also see these results when I investigated the Khaita practice and talked to the dancers. So generally, dancers describe a sense of well-being when they dance. And besides the health aspect, many interviewees stress the point of positive relationships. So they foregrounded this aspect of collaboration that sometimes is required by the choreography. Sometimes you have to take hands and you have to be really close to someone. And yes, to give you a direct impression, I would like to quote here from one of my interviewees. They said this nicely. So I will quote directly. During dances, we need to communicate a lot. Yes, we take arms, we make circle. We need to look the eyes of each other. We need to be in couples or in a group, really to communicate in a group, and we cannot skip it. Sometimes you don't like somebody, and suddenly during Khaita, this person is near me. I need to take the hand or offer katak to this person, and it makes me feel like, ugh. It's a big job happening inside of you. And finally, you feel good after, it makes things happen and relax. And so Khaita make an amazing job in that direction. The second effect that I looked at is mindfulness. And here it's very interesting because Chögyal Namkhai Norbu actually provided a theory of presence and awareness for Khaita. He didn't call it mindfulness, but rather the promotion of presence and awareness. And here he said, for example, I can read this. He said, what do you need to do when you're dancing? You need to move in a coordinated way. And for that, you have to be present. Otherwise, you cannot dance. If you're present while dancing, you also relax and you don't feel so charged up anymore. Then it becomes beneficial for you. It helps relaxing and being present and aware. So the 3 principles that he argued for the Khaita practice and said we always have to keep them in mind when we dance are Dem, Ju, and Tri, 3 Tibetan words. So Dem, smoothness, this is my words for this. So it refers to flexible, smooth, and harmonious execution of movements. It focuses on the individual's perspective and is about the individual's approach to the movement. And so Chögyal Namkhai Norbu contrasted it to military style movement, so very staccato movements. And he said Khaita is not like this. So Khaita is the opposite, is smooth and is fluent, and it transitions harmoniously from one movement into the next movement. Second principle, Ju. This refers to the coordination within the dancer's body, as well as to the correspondence to the choreography. So this means, for example, if the choreography requires to raise the right arm, then dancers have to raise the right arm, even if they might feel differently, but then it doesn't correspond to the dance. And this, of course, desirably in the correct timing of the music. So this really requires dancers to be aware of the choreography and to pay purposeful attention to it. This also means that sometimes one has to recheck with instructors or other expert dancers to compare movements and see if actually what one is doing corresponds. And I would just like to remind you, we have around 240 dances, so it is very likely to forget something or to mix up movements or to just don't know. So this is due correspondence. And the last principle is 3. This refers to the coordination in space and to the correspondence to the music. So it's not so much focused on the individual dancer, but rather the group. And it requires the awareness of the group, the space, the rhythm, and the melody provided by the music. So the best example to illustrate the principle of 3 is the circle formation, because a circle cannot be formed alone, and it requires the collaboration from all dancers. So even if one dancer dances a little bit more inside or outside, in front or behind, the circle is not balanced anymore. And the last effect I want to speak about is joy. So joy is already in the name of Khaita joyful dances. So of course we might assume that it has a special meaning and a special purpose. So it indicates the quality of the dances, and it highlights that it's not so much about perfecting certain movements, but rather that it really embraces these joyful experiences. And it's thereby very interesting to look at what is joy, how can it be defined? So when listening to Chögyal Namkhai Norbu, but also to expert dancers in the Khaita interviews, it became clear to me that joy is not so much as a temporary sensation of happiness, but rather a more endurable state. So joy gets framed here as an experience that can be experienced despite negative events or feelings. So even though one might be sad or angry, one can connect to this deep state, this deep feeling of joy. And many Khaita dancers, for example, shared with me that they often experience strong emotions such as sadness, anger when they dance, but that the Khaita practice really helps them to reconnect with this joy. And one dancer described it like this. And they said, "So I had very big grieving in my life, the experience of being very sad. I think you call it grief. And then dancing with other people, dancing with other people to experience joy at the same time, it's amazing. So for me, the value of really experiencing joy when everything goes well, it's fantastic. When things go medium, it's fantastic. But if it's really, when you're really in the, I don't know what to call it, and here I think the dancer meant this kind of pit, when you're really low, when you really don't feel good, the capacity is inherent to the dance, and at one point, joy is there." Another aspect of joy is also the connection to the previous point, namely mindfulness, of being present and aware, and not thinking so much about other things while dancing. So one dancer described it like this: "It's like when you're dancing and you just don't think about anything, but you're present in the moment. And also that your heart kind of feels lighter. So you don't think about any type of outside problem like, oh, I need to do this exam or there's work tomorrow. So you're just present in the moment and you like are dancing in a joyful way." And so, excuse me. With this, I would also like to finish my presentation here. This was really a brief overview of Khaita. There's many things to explore and many things to speak about. And I invite you all to get involved in Khaita, to start researching, to start dancing if you haven't yet. And there are many offers from the Khaita community to do so. And I want to just briefly tell you where you can find all this material. So I mentioned already the Khaita archive. You can find all songs and dances there. That's khaita.com. Also, you can find the same and even more. You can also find some nice documentaries on YouTube, Harmony in Space. The main website is khaita.org. You might know this website already. Then there is the educational program that I mentioned. This is really for new instructors and expert dancers, so people who really want to go in depth and really study and learn a lot about the dances. Exploring Khaita joyful dances is a new program, is a fantastic opportunity because it's online if you want to start learning dances. So if you are not close to an instructor or you don't have opportunities to learn live, this is a great way to get involved and to start learning some dances and get some theory behind it. And if you just want to dance and don't want to study so much, I mean, but you know, then we also have Khaita Forever. And this is a program that we have each Saturday where we dance 1 hour and we dance different songs and we connect with all people in the world who want to join. And of course, we have social media. So with the tag Harmony in Space, you can find us on Instagram or Facebook. And you can also stay updated in this way about some events, and you can see nice pictures. So I invite you to just explore all the materials that we have. And last thing, if you want to get in contact more personally, you can write to Khaita Joyful Dances, Harmony in the Space at atiyogafoundation.org. And if you want, for some reason, if you want to contact me privately, you're very welcome. If you have some questions, feedbacks, or idea for collaborations, you can contact me. My email is evaleick@hotmail.com. And I'm always very happy to talk about Khaita. And so with this, I would like to close and also open the space for some questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eva, and thank you for everybody who's joined. Yeah, let's welcome any questions. If you have any questions, please, you're welcome. Otherwise, I would like to ask you one. For example, you mentioned that you will continue studying. You just got your PhD this week. Congratulations again. And you mentioned you will do a postdoc. Will that also be about Khaita?
Not now. I say not now. So now I will start working at the Department of Ethnomusicology at the University in Vienna. And it's not directly connected to Khaita, but it's a really new discipline for me. And I hope that this knowledge of this discipline will generate some new insights and some new research opportunities for Khaita. So I'm on it, and I really want to do something more in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any questions for Eva? Don't be shy. I don't see any questions. Everybody seems very shy. Is there anything else you would like to add then, Eva?
No, just thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for giving me the space to also present my work. And I'm very happy if we can spread Khaita in other spaces, institutions, because I think there is a richness to the practice and everyone can take something for them. So it might be something connected to the language, to the Tibetan culture, from the dance aspect, just this social aspect. There's really a richness to the Khaita practice, and I'm very thankful that we have this practice and that so many people are interested. And I encourage everyone to get started with it if you haven't yet.
Thank you. Actually, I have another question. Are more new dances being created now?
This is a very good question, because I explained that the feedback of Chögyal Namkhai Norbu was so important. So in fact, we did some new dances, and Adriana is also listening, so maybe if we are really interested, she could expand on this. So we have a couple of new dances that we did after, with consideration, like we used to do with Rinpoche, that we check the meaning and we try to represent the meaning in movements. So we have a few, but we record and we mention that they were done after Chögyal Namkhai Norbu's death. So we have this in our mind. But yes, we have new dances now, a couple.
Okay, then Eva, on behalf of everybody, thank you so much. And congratulations again on your PhD and on all your hard work. And have a lovely evening, everybody. And thank you, Eva, and hope to see you all soon.